for gathering. I'll call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the CHIP working group. And when I call your name, please signify by saying here. Lori Gibbons.
Here.
Mike Sodina.
Here.
George Baumgarten here. Tim Davis. No. So we have three, we have enough for a quorum. We can get started. Thank you. And Noel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I like the small group. I think the idea is to, at least what I would like to do is just have a discussion as we're trying to sort of form up a plan in certain areas. Again, looking at the agenda, the proposed new peer is invited Noel Collins to speak to that. I put some proposed timeframes on here with the idea that we can spend some time on the pier, but also perhaps up to 5:45 or less than that, but also want to reserve time to talk more broadly about, call it Captain's Walk design thinking, but probably also very much about climate resilience design thinking as well. And with the meeting to adjourn on or before 6:30. Is there anything anyone else would like to add to the agenda? And I don't think I welcomed you as well. Hi, Montana. Thank you for being here. And again, we're going to keep this going till
whenever you're done.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for being here. The two topics here, proposed new pier and Captain's Walk, I think have there's some overlap in concept there. And maybe just to sort of set the stage, in a couple of Harbor Committee meetings to date since June, I've asked the question of this group, what does it mean to be effective? And it really goes back to our charter. Our charter, CHIP, actually is to advise Harbor Committee. The charter of Harbor Committee is to advise the Select Board. And I think topics that, and we haven't brought anything before Select Board since a while, probably since earlier this year. I would like to do that when it's meaningful. I think that the concepts behind Captain's Walk and climate resilience are meaningful, which is why I think we could have a plan to do that. But it's what are the objectives behind that? And again, leading into, for instance, the peer discussion, it's really what do we see as a vision in Harbor Committee around certain objectives? Well, you know, climate resilience being one, but with a peer. So, you know, what are the objectives? What are the objectives? More recreational access, things like that. I think things that could or should matter to the broader populace. So that's where I see, you know, trying to have a context, Noel, for the peer in terms of what are the objectives and what are the considerations as an example, all leading to what would the Harbor Committee bring or advise the Select Board to do. You know, we've had a lot of discussions, so getting into the pier, you've been interested in having an up or down vote. I'll just say in advance, I'm happy to have an up or down vote with Harbor Committee at a next meeting or one thereafter, as the case may be. I thought today would be helpful to have a working session about that, so that we could prepare for that better. I think with this group, I know you have materials. I did send out materials as part of the agenda. I think you may have seen that. The agenda, well, if you looked at the full agenda, I'll just share that I sent out had Lori's email from a year ago about what space usage was in the Harbor Pier notes that you had distributed at the last Harbor Committee meeting. I believe that, you know, in this room, probably there's some familiarity because we've all been part of those discussions so far. So, you know, in terms of going through stuff, we can do that or answer questions on that. I guess I want to hand it to you to just talk about your thoughts and how they developed since the last time. But again, thinking in the context of, I'm almost working backwards from either a harbor committee meeting or something like that. What is the ask? You know, what is the motion? Because that's how everything would work anyway. What is the motion that would be put before someone? Not that you need to get to that, but I want to make sure that the motion is something that serves the purpose of harbor committee and that would be, you know, meet our interest in being effective in the advice that we provide to select board.
Well, thank you. I've been reminded many times that the harbor committee is based on the master plan. The objectives of the harbor committee are set within the master plan itself. The priorities, if you will.
There's about 50 to 80 of them, but yes, that they provide a,
Well, the first,
a good starting group of priorities.
this is what I found. Do you want?
Oh, sure.
As near as I can tell, and there's several versions of that master plan. They all have the same language when it comes to.
There is a final version posted on
Is there?
on the town website.
Is there any difference? I doubt there's any difference because the first 2 or 3 didn't change. But this is what seems to be the charter, if you will, of the harbor committee, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Number 1, of course, is support the commercial fleet. Number 2, and I'm assuming this is in terms of priority, is support public use of and access to the harbor. And in my lifetime, I think we may have extended 1 or 2 docks, maybe Parker Ave. But for all practical purposes, the same docks that I grew up with are the same docks that are in the harbor today. Well, all around us, the harbor is developing at lightning speed, just even in the last year. It's blowing up, if you will. And a tiny little harbor can get congested. I understand that. And it's going to be congested by private or by public. And where the public hasn't had any improved access to the harbor in my lifetime, that seems like a misappropriation of that resource. It's a public resource. I didn't even know until I got my mooring call a couple of years ago from Lori, that the only people that get dock spaces at the town docks are mooring holders. That was news to me, because I've been with the Sailor Club since the 60s. And that came as kind of a shock. I was pleased that I was allowed to get one because now I'm a mooring holder. But that if that doesn't tell you something about public access and how limited it is and restricted it is, I don't know what can. I brought with me the mooring waiting list. Half a dozen pages. It's 512 people on the mooring waiting list, which is 25 to 30 years. That, in my opinion, is a de facto waiting list for a small boat, if dock space, because there's no dock space waiting list for docks. There's 46 people on the commercial waiting list. There's 38 people on the sailing club waiting list. I don't know what the waiting list situation is at the yacht club. These are all found on the internet. So there's almost 600 people, but there's 596 people on these 3 waiting lists. If all you wanted to do, and you know, 30 years ago, when I put myself on the waiting list, I wanted the biggest boat I could find. And when Lori gave me the call, she gave me 3 or 4 options. One was like a 17, one was a 38, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, the difference between a 35-year-old man and a 65-year-old man is the difference between a 38-foot boat and a 26-foot boat, which is what I took. So I'm happy that I've got, you know, and I've been lucky to have my parents' moorings all these years and the sailing club, but we are crushed at Parker Ave. That's very limited space for those limited dock spaces for the public docks, for the public dinghies. Very limited. And I don't know why. we've got that beach right between the sailing club and the commercial pier. It can't be used for anything else. It's rock. All right. The only thing it can support is a pier. There's one mooring in the way. And for the last 2 years, 3 years actually, I've been trying to convince people that my mother's mooring, my late mother, she died Saturday, that her mooring should be swapped for the, thank you, should be swapped for the gentleman, Paul Rooney, where a dock could be placed. Because it's a matter of 2 strokes of the oar to get from one to the other. It's not a big inconvenience. He doesn't own the position. He owns the tackle. That's it. Stone. 50 years ago, the harbor master said to my father, "Where would you like me to move your mooring?" He didn't ask. He said, "Where would you like me to move your mooring to?" Because he wanted to consolidate commercial fleet. My father said, "As close to the sailing club as you get me." And that's exactly what he got. Great.
Okay.
There's a lot of, moving moorings. I can't even begin to know what a nightmare that is in terms of management and processing. It's like Kafka-esque to me, what she has to go through. And I don't want to add to that burden, but I thought that was one of the principal reasons for moving a little quickly, was because while my mother held the mooring position, we had something that we could do to help mitigate whatever inconvenience Rooney was going to experience if the town decided to move forward with a dock where there is now just a mooring. If you could put 20 families on a dock versus one mooring holder, that's not a bad trade if that guy only has to move 50 feet. I didn't think it was a big ask. I still don't. So I think where we haven't done anything in at least my lifetime, and let's just say in the last half century, the most recent half century, we haven't done anything to add public access where everyone else is blowing up on the water. Aren't we a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of providing public access? This proposed dock, and I'm no engineer, I don't pretend to be an engineer, but if it's a 17-foot boat,
Yeah.
okay, and it's probably got, let's say, a minimum of a 3-foot scope off the stone, that's a 40-foot. It spins in a 360-degree angle. That's a 40-foot dock that can be used both sides. It doesn't, Parker Ave, half that dock is a landing. Only half of that dock is being used for dinghies. It's not the whole thing. This dock would just be for dinghies. So that's about 20 spaces.
Understood.
So, if public access is something that the Harbor Committee wants to promote, this is a golden opportunity. It's certainly, I think, something, if the town, and I think, let me be this way, if we ask the people on this waiting list, these 500 people, what do they think? What are your thoughts? What do you think the response would be? Do we have to do that?
I think so. A couple of thoughts. I mean, and the discussion is familiar to me because of the various times we've discussed this over the past year. We, again, as a harbor committee, we now are about to have an active member of the recreation department who can represent the broader recreational needs. I would see that there's the public interest in the problem of public access for dinghies is, if we were to go to the select board, I think we'd get the question of how widespread is this view of the problem. Second question, probably some pushback on access to the harbor. I can speak, to the 400 kids that are involved in the sailing club program, to the 200 people that CMI has that started, in the mid to late 90s that are accessing the water on very frequent occasion. There is access points. Again, it's hard to get together with harbor committees and find them, but I haven't heard personally or through the committee a big clamoring of a problem. So what I sort of anticipate is, there's a quick assumption of a problem and then a very specific solution to that problem. The solution, which is at least as presented, I'm sure we could broaden it, but as presented, looks like it's for dinghies, and small boats in the harbor, which serves a certain segment, not necessarily, the transient segment, but people who live in the town who might want to tie up a boat to a harbor. So that's one aspect of recreation, but it's not a broad aspect from my perspective.
But that's if you only look at the result of installing one pier and one dock. When you do that, if you move, let's write off the docks, the dock spaces up in the cove. With 2/3 of the businesses out of operation this past summer, there was no parking space on Border Street. So that's with 2/3 lights out. That means that you can't get to your dock, your dinghy. If you say there's going to be dinghy spaces at the commercial pier, I really rue the day that anything goes forward in that direction. I don't know if any other community in the world would put teenagers and toddlers on the same dock as commercial fishermen. But that's another story. If this dock space were to go forward, the new one, what does that do to Parker Ave? Or vice versa? I don't think there's any necessary commitment to having just dinghies at this dock. I think we just need to add dock space to free up some space for dinghies, because it's sorely needed, albeit by not a huge part of the community, but certainly by everyone on this list. I think if you ask somebody who's going to wants to be on a mooring list, would they take a 12-foot boat position as well? I don't know. I'd say yes. I think they'd say yes. If I have to wait 25 years in the interim, I'll put the little whale in. Thank you. So I think we can bank on 500 people responding in the affirmative to whether or not this is necessary.
It's a mooring list. Those people they're on the list because they don't have boats in the harbor, right? They don't have big boats on mooring.
No place to put it.
And that's not going to change in a significant way.
No,
Finding
it isn't.
more room, right?
I think that makes the point, doesn't it?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well,
I don't.
If you're a boat person, you want a boat in the harbor.
Well, it's a boat on a mooring. There's different ways to get a boat in a harbor.
One's on a dock, one's on a mooring, one's on a trailer.
Yeah.
And now that we've added a launch ramp that's open for business 24 hours a day, we're gonna have a lot more travel trailers, aren't we?
I don't know. It's been open for all summer. I guess there's a lot of fact finding that I would see, any question coming back from, say, the select board to a recommendation about that. We need data. We need facts.
I think,
and even to propose something that is where the demand is based on what you believe, but not necessarily what we know.
I don't have any problem with that, George.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes all the sense. Be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you're saying. I did inquire. I don't know if anyone in town hall or at the harbor master's office can push a button and email 500 people.
I would say on something topical like this, you can ask Montana what it's like to get responses from people when you try in town hall on topics like this.
I mean, yeah, we can try our best. We can, if we talk to Justin, like the communications director, we could send it out on an email blast, but I can only promise maybe 10 responses, and there's 1,200 people on that emailing list.
Yes, the question is kind of gonna determine whether or not there's any interest. And the question is anyone interested in the dinghy space down in the harbor?
Well, maybe
that's a fair question. You want to gauge interest in a new dinghy dock? Let's see if anybody wants one on the list.
Why don't we ask Lori? How many people come in and asking for a decal and you have to turn them away because there's no space?
I had maybe a couple people this year, but it's not because there was no space, just we don't issue stickers anymore to people who don't have boats on moorings. And we stopped doing that because we had an overcrowding problem, which has gotten much better lately. You know, like the dock in front of the cement pavilion on Border Street, there were spaces there all year. You know, to the point that when we had that microburst in August, and it took out the Parker Avenue gangway. Snapped it off. I had to take all those boats on that dock and I moved them all to the cement dock. There were a few tied up on the front, but we were able to get everybody swung around in the back.
But over the last 3 or 4 years, would you say that there's been a couple every year that come in? Do they have boats already?
No.
They don't have a boat. They're just.
Well, they don't have a boat on the mooring. I
Right.
don't know what they
Yeah.
have available.
Yeah.
But there's not a huge,
Not a huge demand.
you know, people seem to be transitioning a lot to kayaks,
Yeah.
paddle boards, a lot more of those in the last few years.
Where do they store those?
Some of them store them at the sailing club, yacht club,
Only if they're members of the Sailing Club and Yacht Club.
or
Yeah.
they just bring them from their house.
Yeah.
They're not hard to,
Yeah,
move
top of
around.
large, Yeah.
I mean, to me, good question to Lori. It does raise, now, you know, I don't want to boil the ocean. We're at the ocean, but there's lots of perspectives on recreational use. The small boats you're talking about are, I would assume, mostly recreational use, fishing.
Right.
Fishing or just doodling around. Other people, stand-up paddle boards and needing a place to launch them, kayaks, rowing boats. So all those are recreational uses.
I think.
And we haven't, frankly, I haven't heard and we haven't sought. So Harbor Committee has not launched a sort of a broad-based, what are your beliefs in recreational use to the harbor and access to the harbor? And do you have, you know, what is your experience accessing the harbor for those purposes? I mean, I think that's an interesting thing for us to run. I think depending on the answers we get, I don't know the solutions that would come out of that.
I may have made, a huge mistake, assuming that there would be overwhelming support among boat people for more boat access, i.e. a dock. I might be completely wrong. Lori might be right. Very little interest. Let's send an email from the Harbor Committee to the 500 on the waiting list. And if there isn't at least 250, if at least half doesn't respond in the affirmative vigorously, I'll drop it. I couldn't care less. I'm fine. I've got my space.
I think,
So-
I think what you're suggesting though, is you're suggesting that if we build it, they will come.
They're here.
I
They're here.
don't
They're
disagree,
waiting
I
for
don't
you to build
disagree
it.
with that.
They're waiting for you to build it.
No, I'm just saying that. But I think what George is saying is that in order to,
Well,
Get support-
justify
to get
any
support
effort and
from-
expense.
get the support from the select board, we're gonna have to have some kind of data that supports the need, the demand. For it. I don't doubt that if we build it, they will come, but I mean, Lori may have a better feel for that than me, because she's been here doing this
Yeah.
forever. But anyway, that's,
I think that the opportunity is to explore recreational access to the harbor.
Yeah.
Ideally.
And that it's and I think,
Because you free up a dock.
well,
too. You
but
understand that?
I'm getting beyond a dock.
Okay.
What is recreational access to? And then there's, what are the solutions to it? I mean, just as again, I think zeroing in on the solution you've mentioned, at our last Harbor Committee meeting, we also discussed that the town dock, not the town dock, the Government Island Pier is very much still in play, very much still moving forward. And that if that were to move forward, which, there's currently no reason to think it won't, and it has broad, it's moving on its own trajectory. This dock wouldn't be built and you wouldn't be proposing it where it is. I think is what I recall. I don't have the minutes, unfortunately, from the last meeting. But if that dock moves forward, you would have a different opinion about the
No,
placement of this dock.
absolutely not. No, not at all. Because that dock doesn't come towards the proposed dock.
Yeah,
That
there's no
pier does not-
relationship.
I'm sorry?
There's no
There's
relationship.
no relationship. All the
Well, maybe
activity.
I-
on
maybe
the
I
new-
recall it differently.
Yeah.
I- That's what I,
All the, I understand.
what was, was there discussion? I wish I had the minutes, but a discussion of the Government Island Pier, the proposed rebuild of that, and
I've tried
your
to,
proposed pier.
I haven't seen elevations of that. My
I
underst-
did send those to you.
Yeah, elevations though are different.
No,
Yeah.
they're all in the
Elevations,
plan.
Are they?
Vertical control, I mean elevations, vertical
No, that-
controls, or what it looks like?
Yeah, what it would look like to a layperson
Oh.
examining it from afar.
Okay,
Because that's how you can kind of look like layperson can get an idea what's going on. My understanding is that the new pier will be, the new dock for the commercial pier would be further out from the pier.
I mean, there's actually, I was looking on the town website, Lori, there's brand new plans up on the website for October 19th. They were must have just been posted.
They had a meeting with Concom last night.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe they were up there before then. But again, I think I had talked to you, if you just go to the town website and do a search on FOTH,
Yeah.
which is the
Yeah,
engineering
yeah,
firm,
it did, yeah.
all those plans pop up and there's detailed plans, including the elevations.
Okay, I'll take
In
a
those
look again.
plans.
I didn't see them.
Um,
But I think what I said was that if it was an either or situation. Between a new pier, recreational pier, and the improvements to the commercial pier, then of course I. withdraw.
okay,
I didn't have,
okay,
but I
that,
didn't, but I don't see the
yeah,
relation.
it'd be a
I
tough contest.
Yeah, I don't see anything that makes one a competitor for the other.
Well, one thing that in terms of the location of the pier, I know that the Government Island Pier as originally proposed was more, well, this is a new design, and part of the reason it was moved or redesigned to be more toward the Gulf River is because of the initial design was in a velocity zone, the velocity zone, I guess, that comes screaming down the channel. And the pier that, at least the location that you're proposing, appears to be pretty much at or on the border of that velocity zone.
It's in the lee of everything. There's no current like there is.
Oh, not current. We're talking, a nor'easter or a large storm barreling down there.
My skiff has been at the end of the sailing club dock on that side for 50 years. And this would be the same, this would be actually probably better protected than that.
it's almost inboard.
Of that dock? Yes, yes.
It's between the new
Yes.
pier, it's
Yeah.
between the Government Island Pier and the
Yes.
sailing
Yeah.
club's most
Yeah.
westerly-most extension of
Yeah.
their docks where your boat is.
Yeah.
And there's a rock outcropping out there. It's almost inside of that whole
Yeah.
thing. That's the other question that I would be interesting to know, and maybe Lori has heard some scuttlebutt on this relative to the new pier and what it has to offer. Conveyor belts and lifts, whether or not any of the commercial fishermen who currently have their dinghies over by the old salt would move their dinghies over towards the new pier. Because I don't know if there's gonna be any encouragement for them to move their boats over there as well, or because there's half a dozen or more boats right off to that pier. I don't know, but if you got more people interested in taking advantages of those mechanical devices that are being proposed, they may want to be closer to that with their boats and with their dinghies. I don't know.
Oh, I think you're.
But that's
spot on.
that's another piece of data, which we don't have, which are anybody interested in moving their dinghies.
I think you're spot
Which
on.
means that some of those guys might put them on the new dock.
So then it opens up on the other dock.
It opens up on the other dock. Yeah.
It's just swapping a spot for a
Just won't be
spot.
parking.
I mean,
Just won't be any parking.
Parking is the problem.
It's sort of an absolute statement. Parking at the harbor is a tremendous problem. And as much as Mike has identified some incremental ways through, expensive paving and redoing projects. We're gonna have a hard time dramatically solving a parking problem.
But that's not excuse me for interrupting. Parking is not, if I'm being told to ignore the parking situation on Border Street, which I am. If I'm being told to ignore that and pretend it is not a problem,
Well,
then I don't want to hear it's a problem on Government Island. That's just not fair.
I'm not saying it is.
Okay, all right. Well,
I'm just
let's
saying, bringing parking in is a tough problem to solve. I think what you're describing in your location is there appears to be more, call it availability of parking in the lot behind the light keepers than there typically is on the street for some of the other docks. But let me go back to a question: is if we were to look at the basis of this, is it accurate that you're advocating for more access to the harbor for recreational access and more access for dinghy tie-ups, additional dinghy tie-ups, and ideally with better access to parking?
I don't want to include parking in the discussion
Well,
at all. It's just
okay.
not fair.
Well,
It's just not fair. Up to that point, I'm.
all right, so just, you want more,
But
you would
don't-
advocate that there's a demand for more.
I'm driven by my own self-interest. That's what got me focused on this project. if you
Yeah.
will. And I don't have a problem with that because I think it's an interest that a lot of people would share. A lot of people. And when you build a new dock and you take those people that are in Parker Ave all crushed together, you move them over to this dock, or vice versa, you have a free dock. You have now freed up space. If you want to bring your kayak down, sure, you can bring it out in your Volkswagen, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. I've never tried that. I don't want to do it either. That's going to be a nuisance. I don't want to have to spend $1,000 a year for the sailing club for my kayak either. When there's docks and availability for town docks to park them at. I don't think we should look at the public and then have an allergic reaction to them. The public has a right to this resource. It's not the second-class citizen.
It's just understanding the demand.
I get it.
And
And I
agreed,
think
it's, there's lots of things to focus on,
You're a sailing club.
and a rowing guy,
Okay,
and
So
yeah.
last year, if you looked at the end of the Parker Ave dock towards the sailing club, you can't see it. There's a wall, kayaks and paddleboards. A wall, racks upon racks upon.
Oh, at
racks.
the sailing club.
Can't see the sailing club from Parker Ave.
Yeah.
Now, that's only happened in the last 5 years. That's blown up in the last 5 years. Do you think there's any public interest in a place that people could put the kayaks and paddleboards down? I mean, we don't. Do we
I'm
have-
not saying there's not. I mean, I think Lori's comment that people ask about it. We've had people ask if they can put their stuff at Mariners Park. That, of course, that comes up.
Yeah,
Of course.
but I thought.
But it's like, it's both, I look at it in Harbor Committee, how big a problem is it? How big an opportunity is it? There's both sides. And it's something that I see an opportunity as Harbor Committee to advocate for more recreational access. Somehow or another, we have to get more data on that topic. And I do look forward to a better, closer relationship with our Recreation Commission to at least enlist them to help us with that. Because that's the reason they've requested to be members on the Harbor Committee, is to have a say in the recreational aspects of the town. They haven't focused on it to date that I'm aware of. Jeff Hartwell, who I didn't know well, was on Harbor Committee. He stepped away, and now we have Derek Goodwin.
Yeah, they've been on part of recreation. Recreation has been on the Harbor Committee for about 40 years.
Yeah, and I talked with Ted about it, and he was quite
Way
enthusiastic about keeping their representation here. But I see us, to potentially get, say, more input on this. It would be great to collaborate with Rec, because I think they have the right context.
If you're
We
gonna
have the
have a
right co-
liaison on HC, why bother? I mean, that's the whole
Well,
purpose of having the liaison, right?
Yeah, I'm not telling you exactly how it works.
Yeah.
Just say we have a natural connection. And having two committees after something potentially yields a stronger response. I was sort of kidding about Montana. She was personally beating the drum to get people to take a survey, and with a lot of folks, and it looked, 8 or 10 people took a survey of around the harbor, and it's very hard to get response on this stuff. But
I disagree.
this may end
Yeah.
up being different.
I disagree, yeah.
Well,
What do we,
I'm not necessarily, hers is living proof of it, of what that survey that you put out. So put out another survey and hopefully we'll hope for better.
do you need a recommendation, proposed recommendation for that, or is that something that you could move along? And do the selectmen have to task someone with this survey? In other words,
No, I don't think so. We're
happy to provide
advising the select board, but we take a lot of actions. I mean, Mike and I we hold public meetings. These public meetings are, to gather information. Surveys gather information.
so.
We would work with Montana. I'm not promising we're doing this, but that's how we would do it. Only things that I look at with select board is we would say, this is something we're interested in. We think we have good reason to do it. Here's how we're approaching it. It would be, to advise and get their buy-in, but permission, I think we can work with.
Okay. Do you want to see the proposals that, recommendations that you suggested I put together tonight?
Sure.
Good. I've been trying to protect Mr. Rooney's position, his mooring position, to the extent that I can, which is none. But I did inquire if if my mother's mooring could be set aside while we're going through this discussion, having this process of considering a new pier. And my understanding, and Laura, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're not capable of doing that.
If I'm offering moorings this upcoming year, no, it would go to the list.
So that would imperil, well, that would ruin the opportunity for Mr. Rooney to move. So what I'm suggesting is that the selectmen, if necessary, or the manager, whomever, take the recommendation from the harbor committee to instruct the harbor master's office to remove that mooring from the list. So it can't be reassigned. So that in the event the pier goes forward, Mr. Rooney can just be moved 50 feet. This is to protect him. And I'm sure I'm his worst enemy right now.
Yeah.
I still want to look out for the guy. Because it's going to be easier to swallow if he doesn't have to take a mooring somewhere up the creek. Or God forbid, the cove.
So just again, these are 3 proposals.
Yeah, that's for number 1.
So the proposed is to take your late mother's mooring off the available list.
Yeah.
The second, to instruct Lori to move a mooring position, and third, to consider the proposed new pier plan.
Mhm.
I do think it's a lot to ask with the working backwards. I mean, the whole thing is the pier plan, and the pier plan is a solution that is not clear on what the demand is and the problem is.
Resources are going to get
It's certainly
burned up.
consistent with where we've been talking the past year, but there's no clarity of demand on this.
I think it's as crystal as it gets.
For you it
if
is.
you want to derail,
For you it
if you
is.
want to slow walk this or derail this, then you don't take these golden opportunities. It's right now. My mother just died Saturday. That mooring's first time has been 3.5 centuries. It's going to go to somebody else. Then we're going to hear, oh, well, we don't want to move Mr. Rooney up the creek.
Well,
we could've- we
there's
could've-
just a ton of presumption here.
I think that's a pretty obvious.
It's,
that's a
it's
natural-
obvious to you. It's just, these are presumptions.
No, these are facts. It's on the list. It goes out.
Yeah.
That's a fact. You just told you. It goes on the list. Do you think it's gonna be undesirable for the next person on the list? It's a nice mooring. It's a great position. It's gonna go like that. That's a fact.
I think it's a. In terms of harbor committee getting behind a pier, I think the data on it at this point, if its presumption is for recreational purposes and there's how it's going to be used, and notwithstanding the chapter 91 approvals, the location of it, whether or not has to be assessed and all the money. I mean, those are also I do see when the harbor committee comes forward and says, we're preparing a plan and these are the things we're considering. That's all good. When it comes to actually doing something specific, then the next question is going to be where's the money?
Well, the first thing you ask is, do you want to do it at all?
Well,
You don't find the money for something you're not sure you want to do.
okay.
First, you have.
All right, so I'm with you on
first
that.
first you have to
I hear
really do
Noel
it,
Collins wants
then
to
you
build a
design it,
pier.
And then you fund it.
I hear Noel Collins wants to build a pier.
I think 500 other people would join me in that sentiment. And their families.
Then that's sort of the next. It would be an important next step.
You know,
I'm not. I would love there to be lots of room in the place, but in the harbor. But presuming there's a ton of presumptions here that if they asked me as head of harbor committee, what do you know about this? I'd say,
not sure if people want it. Is that really the response of the?
well, if you want to know, no, I stop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, fine.
because I know there's a lot. That's a matter of what our priorities are and whether we put this together. I see an opportunity to do it, to move forward on the charter with the harbor and explore people's demand. And even you sort of need to create the demand. There's the dinghies, there's the stand-up paddle boards, there's the kayaks, there's other potential uses. Hopefully not jet skis. Probably don't like those. I know Lori's not a big fan. But what are the demands in the town for recreational space, and then identifying solutions to do them? I mean, this is right now, I think you've zeroed in on this because of the fact that there's a mooring right there that you have an interest in, and there's a potential space. But there's a whole lot more to it, as you're aware.
Yeah, because it's one step in front of the other, right?
I think finding out what the demand is pretty significant, and you can conjecture on it all day long, but that's not going to go far with a select board.
Well, we have a mailing list. The town has, I mean, I hope it didn't sound like it was a rhetorical question. Of course, the town has a mailing list for everyone on this waiting list. That's a fact. And whether it's been digitized and it's a push button thing and simple to do, I don't know. But I tend to think it is, because there are mass mailings. I mean, that's one of the whole reasons we have an IT department, isn't it? So I think that's not a big ask to inquire of the 500 people on a 20+ 30-year waiting list, if they'd like to see.
I mean, that's a very narrow view. If I were to present that view, that's looking at potential mooring holders and people who want dinghy access.
Are you opposed to the question of the survey?
I think it's a broader question.
Okay.
I think it's a townwide question.
Okay.
And it's not limited to dinghies. It's recreational use.
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't.
So I'm looking at it, we're having this discussion. I do see, and this is where I started the meeting, I think the harbor committee trying to move forward to let's say create more equitable access and make people aware of access to the harbor is a great mission for us. And we would explore all the avenues we have, all the docks, which docks might be repurposed, expanded, changed in order to support that. I think it would be tough going into select board with this very specific solution at this point.
I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
But to the extent that we can move along with the survey threshold, great. If you want to cooperate, I'm happy to cooperate on that.
I
I
want to
can-
do a survey.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea. I think that it may be, surveys are not trivial to do or put together or execute. So we need to think about how broad we want the survey to be, but I think it's a good idea. I can't sit here in 15 minutes and commit to you, Noel, and I'm not going to.
it's been 12 months.
I'm not gonna commit in 12 months
Not-
either.
not-
I'm
not
just telling
15
you.
minutes. It's been a lengthy,
I know it has
But-
been. You've been beating the drum for 12 months,
well, before that even,
maybe.
okay?
I think
Yeah.
if you open up the survey to include moorings and all that stuff, you're just muddying the water. This is about dinghies. It's not about moorings.
And paddle boards. and
Because there's
kayaks.
there's no more space for moorings, so, right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, I'm not even touching moorings.
no, I
All
know,
do
but
is-
I'm not sure.
But I mean, the question was working off a mooring list is probably not the right starting point.
Oh, it's exactly the right spot.
But those people might have dinghies that they want.
No,
to put
they
in docks.
definitely, as opposed to having no boat in the harbor, would be very happy to have a 12-foot boat in the harbor. If you don't know that, then maybe we have a different.
I have a 12-foot boat in the harbor. I never
You
asked
like
for
it?
a mooring.
You,
That's just me.
yeah, but you like the 12-foot boat?
You know,
I'm gonna reach an age, I hope, where I don't
know.
want a 26
Yeah.
foot boat.
I,
You know, I'm gonna.
these are just personal feelings, Noel. I can't expand my thoughts to all the people who are my neighbors on, in Cohasset. I just know how I feel.
I'll wager half of that list would vigorously support. At least 200 on that list would vigorously support additional dock space, stand-up paddleboard, kayak opportunities down at the harbor. I could be wrong, but I really doubt it.
So
Mhm.
let me just, I mean, we're sort of having a wide-ranging discussion. It sounds like we're in agreement that getting a better understanding of demand for recreational space is an important foundation.
Dinghies, kayaks, and paddleboards.
Oh, there may be other stuff. Those are just the ones that come to mind.
That's enough.
Well,
I've broadened it past dinghies, George. You've pushed
good
it.
for you.
I'm happy. I'm happy-
I'm
and
proposing it's
And I'm
recreation.
suggesting that when one is improved, the other one is naturally a residual beneficiary of that. You're gonna have space to put in a place for the kayakers and the paddleboarders. You know, the people who,
But so, I think let's just say, I'm not saying it's that narrow. I think it's a good idea, and it's something that fits with the mission of a broader view of the harbor. In terms of moving forward with a specific solution, again, I know you've been on this. It would be, again, could put this to a vote of harbor committee. But I think in order for harbor committee to bring anything before, which is an action plan, to bring it before select board, I think there's a lot of due diligence to do and being able to show numbers and show the attempts to find out the demand
well, can we
before we
agree?
can propose a solution.
I am completely with you on the survey idea.
Mhm.
Can we agree that having that done, that each thing makes a choice up or down? To make that recommendation to the selectmen up or down.
What does?
Once the survey's done, and I'm assuming you have to make some assumptions to move forward, that we notify the people on the wait list.
Yeah, you'd have to notify everybody in the town.
They notify everybody in the town. That's what
Yeah.
publication. We don't have the Mariner anymore per se, but whatever media the town wants to use. But that's not the people I'm trying to reach. And I can't rely on just the media, social media.
Right.
I think we have a mailing list. And I think we should notify them that there's gonna be a change to the waiting list for dinghies. This is an opportunity for them. 500 people on a 30-year wait list. I think they're entitled to know. And it's a push of a button.
There's not a waiting list for dinghies.
Yeah, it's called a mooring list.
No, we have a mooring waiting list.
It's the same thing.
No, it's not.
You don't
I'm not
allow
gonna-
anybody without a mooring to
'Cause we
dock
don't have the space.
because we don't have the space.
But
Yeah.
it's opening up, like I said earlier, the dock in front of the cement pavilion.
Where there's no parking.
Forget
But
about
you-
the parking. There's no parking any place around the harbor.
There is. I know there's plenty of parking.
Where's that?
Right where I'm proposing we put a new dock. It's called the Ed Young Lot.
That is used almost every weekend by light keepers.
And there's always
their
enough
events.
space.
Yeah.
No, there is not.
Always enough space.
I've
we've
got
got tra-
pictures where they've got signs out. No boat parking for event today.
Yeah, because, and a third of that, 20% of that lot is used just to store trailers. I submit that storing trailers where cars could be parked is not the highest and best use of that space.
I mean, I thought we talked a few minutes ago that parking complicates this discussion.
But if I have to, this is.
I know,
is
but
the
it does
thing.
sound like it matters, but then it doesn't matter.
Oh.
So,
Well, if it matters, let me tell you why it doesn't.
Well,
I just think, if I'm gonna answer what I have to answer to.
mhm.
But anyway, yeah. So we're talking about how we're gonna inform people
Well, I think
think that-
assessing the demand through a survey is a great idea.
to the mooring list people. If
I,
not,
no, I actually, I'm not limiting it to that anymore.
Not limiting.
Yes.
at least targeting, them, at least getting it to them.
No, target the town.
So
If
you
you- are
don't- so
these
you
people
don't-
on the mooring
So you
list?
don't want to notify the mooring list? You-
No,
As a harbor committee, you don't want to notify
I
the
would-
mooring list of
we
whether
serve
they
the
think they
town.
need a new dock.
we serve the town. And if you look at the municipal harbor plan, which there is a more current copy, and there's a lot of priorities in it that are ours to distill. Our charter is to the town, not to the mooring list.
I'm not limiting it to the mooring list,
Uh,
but I'm
There we
saying
go.
part of that notification should be directed to the mooring list. Part of that process should include an email to the mooring list.
Yeah, I would say isolating that, it would be,
Not isolating, including.
I hope if they're citizens of the town, then they would be included.
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
Do they live in town? It would be to people who live in town,
Yes.
is the
Well, the
mooring,
mooring list has people from out of town as well.
Right.
well. I don't know enough about how to reach people. These surveys, I mean, this stuff, I do run surveys in small groups. They're a big effort to put together. So doing it by US mail versus email versus other ways, there's Survey Monkey or, whatever the various online tools, they're not trivial. And to do the online, which you get better response, you have to have good email addresses, and that's a challenge.
I think we have them.
I can tell you those are a challenge.
Yeah.
They just are.
If the harbor committee is saying that they
I'm
don't
not
want to
saying you
take the
can't do
time
it,
to
no.
notify the mooring list. Believe me, I can work with that. I can
No,
work with that.
I'm suggesting
I'm not
that
at
the
all-
work we do on a survey for recreation is gonna be at the townwide level.
Of course. But not to the exclusion of the mooring list, where you have their emails. You're going to notify them, right? Tell me that you're going to include them in the
Honestly, have
notification.
not looked into what we know about the mooring list. Do we have email addresses for everybody on the mooring list?
Just about everybody.
Okay, then we could probably hit those.
Do you not want to? It sounds like you're reluctant to.
No,
Okay.
don't put words in my mouth. I'm just
No,
trying
I'm
to find
trying to
out.
discern what I'm hearing. I'm feeling resistance. It's not like
Well,
I've
I'm
been,
just saying, I think it's a big effort. It's in line with our objectives. We need to discuss it and form a plan on it, because this stuff is all volunteer work to do. This is not something that, Montana is gonna take time aside and spend a lot of time doing a survey. It's gonna be something that's driven by members of Harbor Committee to get it done using the tools available from the town. That's how I would see it.
is public access to the harbor a priority for the harbor committee?
Of course it is.
Okay.
But it's one of a lot of them.
Well, it's the second most important one, right?
No,
It is.
I put out what the Harbor Committee priorities were at the last meeting we put out. And it's an important one. I can't tell you whether it's 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, because we didn't decide that.
But you're comfortable, I'm comfortable taking this forward more,
Mhm.
subject to the results of a survey.
Okay,
I won't be looking for an up or down at the next meeting in November.
okay.
I think it makes perfect sense to do what you're suggesting,
Mhm.
provided that we get that email notice and to the mooring holder list to survey them directly. The same notice, the same email, the same information, but at least to the email list of the mooring holder.
So I'm gonna put in the notes that we want to do a survey for recreation to include the town and to the best of our ability to include the mooring list. I don't know the data we have. I can tell you that just even emails among a small group of people I know, they change all the time. So in terms of accuracy of email lists, it's one of the hardest things to manage of any organization. But we'll do the best we
I
can.
think you'd be shocked at how astute mooring list holders are at maintaining their
Well, that one, I
contact
understand
with the harbor master's
yeah.
office.
No,
No. No, not necessarily.
that's okay. Okay,
Okay. Thanks. Good talk.
thank you for the discussion.
Mhm.
And you're welcome to stay, or we're gonna continue.
I've got a lot of stuff I gotta do this
All
week,
right.
but thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Good night all.
No.
And I know,
Assume nobody else has joined our Zoom.
No, they would have popped up on top.
Yeah, and I publicized it so big.
It's okay. Very important stuff.
Um. Thank you for your patience in the discussion. I think we, anyway, it was arrived at a good spot. Of not pushing this forward immediately.
The priority is the pier. And that's gonna add dinghy space.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I just view, it's one thing to do planning around stuff, but to push a solution right now out in front of that. You know, it's not, anyway, he didn't propose to do it. And I think it's not a chit that I would want to use as the first thing that comes out of Harbor Committee this year. Particularly while the pier is so in play.
Right, yeah, they've got all their permits as of last night except for stormwater permit.
Chapter 91 is done.
I believe so. I believe everything is. They had to, well, they're all through with Concom, let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Except for stormwater permit. I think they ran out of time last night. And they also are behind on doing stormwater because the budget has been more than exhausted for engineering costs for that.
remind me, because I'm interested, what is the stormwater aspect of the new?
It's the runoff. It's nothing major.
Okay,
except
It's
it
like-
becomes major, doesn't it?
Yeah, they have to go through the
Yeah.
process.
but I guess it's the hard impermeable surface. and the
Yes.
Water that then
Yeah.
comes off and splashes or goes somewhere,
Yeah.
but just in the space of.
It has to
Of
go
the
out somewhere
pier.
before it goes into the ocean.
Okay,
Um,
so the next topic, which we can spend another 30 minutes on. I had put in Captain's Walk design thinking. Multi-year plan, including, and I'm playing off a lot of your good thinking, Mike. Sidewalks, roadways, parking. That's something you focused on already, and we held public meetings on back in January. Historical signage, which I'm confident the Historical Commission will seize the day that when they get the chance
Yeah,
to.
that's,
It's just something.
it's just something, it's,
But the recreational access and public, anyway, recreational access, I do see as an opportunity. You know, I feel, well, anyway, I feel there's an opportunity to identify. Now, Harbor Committee could create a plan where we're identifying opportunities to the select board and just say it's something we're working on developing, so that when folks like Noel or others come along with ideas, we have a grant, we have a more comprehensive plan based on data to evaluate ideas against. And then climate resilience, I really shouldn't have lumped this in, because I think we agreed at the last Harbor Committee not to lump climate resilience into stuff, because it's such a big deal. And it seems to get its own grants somehow. Good
But
work.
climate resilience is the only thing on this list that's holding up any further development of the Captain's Walk.
That's holding up.
Yeah.
Well,
We can't,
it creates, because it
we
creates
can't go, we
uncertainty.
can't, there's no point in going forward with any other public presentations of the opportunities for a Captain's Walk without incorporating climate
Yeah,
resilience.
okay. So I have it in here. I just want to make sure it doesn't get buried as a topic, because it's,
No, it's,
because it's the thing that is compelling and getting funding now for planning, and it will also potentially is the place where we can get additional funding at such point to execute. And interestingly, at least looking at the, I think, alternative one plans that are in the Woods Hole group, it aligns pretty well with some thinking about improvements for Captain's Walk, because it's in the same space around the cove, and
Yeah.
and then, you know, to a lesser degree, heading out into Summer Street.
so what is the status of the grant being available and it being available to the town for consultants or whatever?
So we literally just signed the contract on Friday.
With whom?
So we got awarded for 2 CZM grants. One is with Woods Hole and doing a flood pathway design and focusing on like the Cohasset. We're building off of last year's grant. So we're focusing on like Elm Street and Summer Street, a little bit of border, and doing some repaving and elevation, sorry, not elevation, but fixing a culvert near Cohasset Cove. And then we got accepted for another one with it, which is with Woodern and Curran. And that's resealing sewer like manholes and a few pipelines underneath. And
But
they're all,
so playing that back,
yeah,
the one for sewer doing manhole stuff, that's actual execution work,
yeah,
right,
so
that's
that's like
doing work.
implementation, not design.
right? And the other one is design work.
Yeah,
But Woods Hole's not, that's not an engineering firm, so
no, Woodern and Curran is
Well,
the
but that's-
implementation, and then the first one I talked about is working with Weston and Sampson and Woods Hole Group.
Okay, hold on,
so Weston Sampson has already been hired?
Yeah, they're like, we're doing, we have multiple partners working with us, cause it's flood planning and engineering is obviously not our expertise. I mean, Brian Joyce is the one who's really the top dog at this. I'm doing a lot of administration and the public outreach and community stuff like that, but he's doing like the planning aspect of it.
But so for the climate resilience design work
Mhm.
that's along Summer Street and some at the Cove. There's 2 vendors on that. That's Woods Hole Group and Weston and Sampson.
Yeah,
And what is the expected output? What is the ideal outcome of their work?
the goal is, I mean, the goal is to create plans that will create more suggestions for like like possible seawall or repairing of culverts, installing a new culverts, like they're similar to last year, like he's gonna do a design pathway and basically be like, here are a few other like implementation suggestions you can do for the next grant cycle. So we're just continuously building ourselves up to kind of be guaranteed into the next grant cycle. But as of right now, we just signed the contract. The next step is doing a kickoff meeting, and we haven't even set the date for that yet. So,
Okay,
yeah.
You had said at one of the previous harbor committee meetings when this grant was being submitted that there was Obviously, the potential for Cove Street and Summer Street to be elevated.
Yeah, we surpassed that just because we were trying to correlate with Elm Street getting repaved. And we were a little bit on a time crunch, so we just decided we're not gonna do that,
You're not gonna do what?
elevate anything.
But that was
Well,
part of, that was part
as
of,
part
Wood's-
of- part
that
of
was
the-
part of Wood's whole plan. So how does this mesh with the resiliency issue?
It's just too much of a, that we're doing a 1 year, that's a few year grant, like. One of his suggestions could be from this design plan to elevate the road in the following grant year. And then we would pair with a different partner, but that's not happening this year.
So I mean, to me, I mean, I think. We saw that the repaving of Elm Street and Cove Street, yeah, it was disappointing that it was kept same as, but be that as it may. Now we have a nice smooth paved surface to drive on, right?
Well, it's only the base course, and they got a lot.
Is it
more-
still?
It's just base, they'll
Yeah.
do the whole, they'll do the finish next year
Okay,
in the spring.
but I guess if a bigger
Except for-
deal climate resilience plan comes out that says that still could be or should be re-engineered and it's the least expensive solution for the town to do something, then
There's a
presumably there'd be
terribly
some throwaway work.
It's
Right,
a terribly simple solution.
well,
Is Brian Joyce the person to approach on this?
Yeah, anything that's,
He's like the project manager for this whole thing.
yeah, I mean, he is gonna answer your questions regarding like. To like engineering, town plans, I'm doing admin stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And just like being the communication person with
Yeah.
CCM, but he is that like on paper project
Yeah,
manager.
okay, good.
so
Did
let
we ever
me,
hear anything on Elm Street,
No, I have not, nothing.
the grant that was submitted? Application that was submitted for that?
but there was
With-
the one that there was a potential for it to get accepted in October.
What was the state agency that we applied for? I've
I don't
applied for
know, it
like.
was a $910,000 request. And
if-
it was written by the sidewalk committee.
Oh, for One Stop, yeah, we weren't accepted for that, but
Or-
I've already been talking with. Justin or Jay, whichever name Pimpieri that he goes by, I get a little confused on that. I mean, by the time we found out about One Stop, we only had like a month to plan.
Yeah.
So I spoke to him and I said, let's start planning like in next month, so we have extensively more content that. Not that it doesn't seem serious previously, but that it just seems a little more prepared because he and I were rushing to get it submitted. And I think if we take more time to go over and get more people involved, I think it will be better, but I just found out last week that we weren't accepted.
But there's no point in doing another grant if we're in the process of rebuilding the road as it is.
Well, if he wants to focus on a different sidewalk in town, like
Yeah.
King Street or
Yeah, that's
Jerusalem, yeah.
More sidewalks to nowhere.
But so let me ask Mike.
So anyway, the reason I brought this up was,
Yeah.
is that the resiliency issue regarding Captain's Block is part and parcel to being able to advance any kind of discussion with more townspeople,
Yeah.
the powers that be who never come to these meetings, but have a veto when it comes to having a presentation in front of them. But so I just wanted to suggest that where we are on the, I'm not trying to exclude you from the conversation. Excuse my back. Where we are on this Captain's Walk thing, Lori, is I did a study about a year ago that looked at the opportunities for the walk along the harbor, literally from Summer Street to Government Island. Increasing the width of the walk, increasing the parking, and tying it into the open space behind the condominium project, which is a requirement by the state. Theoretically tying it from across to Margin Street. And even potentially into the Oaks.
Well, you did a study and we called two public meetings on the
Yeah,
topic.
so we had these discussions with the number of people that were attending. I would say there was like 15 or 20 people
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But it showed the opportunities that can be done without really significant problems, except for, of course, except for money.
Well,
But
but
but anyway, the
assuming work
resiliency-
has to be done at some point,
Yeah.
is like we don't have to do these this
Yeah.
spring, but there is an opportunity for
but
improvement
people like
the next time we get to this.
people like Brian Joyce, people like the select board, people in any of the other advisory committees, none of them, except for Mike Dick,
Well,
have been to those meetings, so they don't have any clue that Captain's Walk is actually something that is even on our agenda,
right,
and or the potential. And all these things tie back into things that are going on and will get bypassed by things that are going on because nobody's aware of them. For instance, this conversation about parking. The select board about 3 months ago killed the Elm Street project, which
would have
increased
increased parking.
parking.
Yeah.
Because they killed it. Well, let me put it this way. Even if they hadn't killed it, they killed the parking that was added. Because they didn't want any parking down by the cove. Believe it or not,
no,
okay? So when we talk about the problems with parking around the harbor, and the select board has got to know that there's problems about parking around the harbor. They didn't want any parking on Cove Street, they didn't want any parking on Border Street. They didn't want any parking on the north side of the island. If you narrow up the street, as we were proposing, you got to pick up about 20 or 25 spaces. They didn't want it. So there's that, when I say they have a veto, they not only kill the project, but they would have killed the parking even if they had voted in the project. So none of these people are aware that there's things that are going on.
Yeah.
Took 12 years to build the boat ramp, right? So
so this is a frustration. I mean, as a harbor committee, and I was at the meeting on Zoom, listening to the select board saying, get it done. They didn't specifically, say, I'm gonna kill parking because I hate parking. I think the fire chief had a big say,
yeah, well,
there were different parties that had a big say,
Yeah.
and there weren't a lot of people advocating for it. When I look at how are we gonna be effective? Unless you can find a way to get townspeople to attend with a voice and get in front of people like the fire chief who may have, call them in a butter. People who are not going to be for this plan, we would expect the same treatment.
absolutely.
And I think that these big plans for climate resilience, they sound awesome until it's your house that has its view blocked because we're putting up a seawall, or it's you that have to drive over some big hump because
Raise the
there's
roads,
gonna
raise the roads 4 feet and be able to get up
Yeah.
your driveway and actually get out of your front door without walking up a.
so it's nothing against the climate, but
Brilliant.
these are big changes that unless there is strong advocacy in front of them that gets the public somehow excited about it, even the climate resilience stuff's going to go nowhere. It's not going to get funded. It's going to have a bunch of not in my backyard stuff to it. This stuff's not easy to do. It's taken away people's access and view in order, for the hypothetical problem of a major storm.
Anyway, there's, from the standpoint of the Captain's Walk, we can integrate into part of the recommendations or some of the opportunities, I should call them. This simple resiliency thing that solves the problem at the whole cove end, which solves the problem of all of Elm Street. With the exception of whatever water comes from Summer Street, which is gonna be raised 4 feet.
Well, this is where I
Um,
did see the opportunity is that, the Woods Hole Group and Weston and Sampson are gonna go down a route to the degree we can. Again,
Yeah, well, once
but
Weston
I
and
see-
Sampson,
I know you're don't have a high opinion
no.
of them.
when Weston Sampson was hired for Elm Street, making a stronger connection between the harbor and the town. They wanted to take private property to make it even bigger. That was their first shot out of the.
So they don't
So,
understand.
They don't understand, they don't get it. But anyway, that's my beef with that engineering.
So what I'm thinking of with design thinking is at least have a plan that incorporates what we envision is going to come out of climate resilience. What we've already presented and heard some pretty positive feedback in the public sessions.
Yeah.
About a potentially better solution on Border Street. And something that, yes, creates a more pedestrian and bike friendly space for kids and adults alike, a promenade along the harbor.
Yeah.
And layer in, at least theoretically, provide some visibility to access points of recreation. And, you know, they may not be anything more than, if you started with today, it's Mariners Park, it's, the sailing club.
Yeah.
And people occasionally venturing down other docks. It may be as simple as that. I think the area across on Margin Street where, George McGoldrick said they tried to sell, they would love to sell that empty lot to the town, and there's been feedback on that. But that's another potential point of recreational access to the harbor that we've discussed on and off as a committee. And using that dock at Margin Street where that's just been repaved, right? I think it was.
Yeah, well, they have not. There's a base coat. The top coat starts at Butler's first driveway and goes to Whitehead Road. That's completely done. The top coat and everything has been done.
Is the
as
only
of
reason
today.
top coat isn't done is simply they ran out of runway, ran out of cold weather? Or warm
No,
weather?
they're not. From what I understand, it's because they don't want to put brand new tar down where all the construction's going on and have it get all torn up.
Oh,
That's why they're waiting till
that's
spring.
sort of sensible, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's why they're waiting till spring to do the finish coat.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But so, just in this small group, working with you, Mike, very talented at pulling together lots of disparate elements. Very frustrated with the fact that it's hard to get anybody interested in it.
yep, until it gets before the boards and they don't know anything about it, and then all you need is a couple of people who are against it and they buy into what that is.
Yeah. And and I don't know that we solve it, but that's what I see as the big challenge of Harbor Committee. It's not thinking through the ideas is sort of the fun part, getting neighbors and abutters and the broader populace. I mean, even with Elm Street, other than me and there were a handful of people who didn't live on Elm Street who attended those seminars, but not much, even though, 90% of the town drives through Elm Street at least once or twice a week.
Well, early on when Elm Street had the working group, we'd had 20, 30, 40 people in those meetings. And a lot of them were in that area. A lot of them were Elm Street residents and a lot of them were in favor. The ones that came to the meeting that killed it, they were against it, but the favors didn't come.
Yeah. Well, and the other challenge that we've seen is, you can try and prepare the select board and then they turn over every year. So we have to factor that in. If we're trying to influence the select board to do something, factor in that you're going to have to keep refreshing the discussion all the time. It's people like, the fire chief and police chief, those guys tend to hang around. Harbor masters hang around. Brian Joyce hangs around, so it's a lot of town employees stay around.
It's been
But,
about 10 years. Maybe 10 years.
You say he has 10 years he's been here or 10 years to go?
No, he's been here about 10 years. I think.
Yeah. Well, I think what Mike, what I hear you saying is you're still willing to try and put it forward to help construct a broader plan. No, I won't say the word construct, that's a bit too big.
What's the broader plan?
Well, a plan that tries to incorporate what we know or think is potentially happening in climate resilience planning
No,
and,
yeah,
and layer that in
Yeah.
with Captain's Walk. And then I would want to, even though it's, I think, very simple, layer in recreational on top. I don't know what else to layer in. But to have that, I think that potentially makes for a good short discussion with select board to say, this is what we're thinking about. We're pulling together these elements. And, you know, it would even help our cause if we were to collaborate with certain other committees that may have a like interest. You know, parking or sidewalks or guys like that, that we're thinking about these things. And that, you know, to try and make ourselves relevant so that when discussions do come up that matter on those things, they're already aware that we were thinking about that. We may be called in to consult or to advise. But that's going to take a lot of work. The plan's a lot of work, and then influencing is more work. You're in the town. What do you think of influencing people?
I don't know.
I mean, there's not
Mhm.
central gatherings, right? I mean, you know,
No.
different departments are doing their own thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
everybody does
so,
that.
you know, the fire chief isn't engaging with Brian Joyce or with you or others. You
If
know,
there's a specific topic,
yeah,
but, no.
but like Chris Senior's not pulling together a staff meeting with these disparate groups, right? That
No,
not
Well,
his
he
thing.
has his cabinet. We meet we had a meeting today from 3 to 5.
Who's the cabinet?
Police chief, fire chief, harbor master, finance director, assistant town manager, town engineer.
Met from 3 to 5.
Well, we got through at 4:30.
Yeah, but that's and is that a discussion or Chris sharing information or different people with different topics having their 5 minutes of fame?
He'll start out with, like today we were talking about the town meeting and the articles and the warrant that's going out at the end of the week.
Yeah,
Um,
trying to make sure nobody's surprised or
no,
everybody's had their
just
input.
informing people
Yeah.
and, it's a huge warrant. It's 88 pages long,
What does it include? Bylaws?
zoning. Tons of zoning in there.
Oh, those are sleepers, but yeah.
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 And then he'll go around and if we have something going on, he was like, how's the harbor close up going, shutting down for the
So,
year.
but it's a
There'll be
nobody's,
a round robin discussion.
at least the way he runs it, it sounds like people feel fairly comfortable speaking up.
Oh, yeah,
Because that's not always the case in meetings.
No, because it's the same group. We've been together for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, maybe longer.
Does he go
and,
around the room and say?
Yeah,
"Lori,
oh, yeah.
anything up with you?"
After he gets through with whatever he discusses, sometimes it may just be talking about, budget, Michelle Leary. She's, procurement as well as assistant town manager and human resource, and she was reminding us that, the capital budget cycle is gonna start, so we gotta put our hats on. And figure out what our requests are gonna be. For,
I mean, that's like
upcoming.
somebody wants a new dump truck for the dump, somebody
Exactly.
wants a new plow
Exactly.
for what have you.
I want a new office building, stuff like that. They need new cruisers, whatever.
Yeah.
IT always
But
needs
this
money.
is a meeting of town employees. There's not,
Certain
no
ones.
select board
No,
representation at this.
there's
or
a select
stuff.
group, and then he does, manages, department head meetings,
Okay,
with the whole group, a couple
Okay.
times a year.
Well, you somewhat answered my question about meetings, but and that's not necessarily the place to influence people, but this whole idea of influencing, you know, had it been Elm Street, I look at that as my call it near-term learning experience. How do you anticipate that John Dockery is going to have an opinion, and Brian Joyce is going to have an opinion, and you've got a select board that says get it done, and you have climate resilience, which isn't quite ready to present itself. You know, how do you help influence that trajectory? It's a rhetorical question. But as a starting point, well, we're about done here, but I think I've talked with, I think everybody here that as Harbor Committee, I'm going to propose at the next meeting that we establish subcommittees of Harbor Committee. Well, it's really a matter of being able to meet and move forward.
Aren't we a subcommittee already?
Well, that's the thing. We're not. We're a separately appointed committee. And that's cumbersome.
No, I'm talking about Chip.
Well, Chip is. But what I want to propose is subcommittees of 2 people. So you get 2 or 3 max. 4 is a problem because you need 3 to have a quorum. If you have a 3-person subcommittee, you can get a quorum with 2. And there is a function of being able to move things forward. And I think having these meetings are not easy. So and a school committee does this. School committee has a 5-person committee. In order to zero in on issues, they set up subcommittees of 2 people. They can post a meeting, have a meeting, discuss stuff, move on. Very easy. And our challenge is we're not structured to do that easily. So it's not a lot. I proposed or I'm going to propose a subcommittee that really may in effect replace Chip. I would like a subcommittee ideally, and I probably want your real opinion on it, but we talked at the last Harbor Committee that our capital expectations, nobody's good at them in town, and we should be thinking about capital needs that may come from that go along with the design plan, for instance. What are capital considerations to keep in mind for the future? But I know those things go through you. It's not like a new dump truck. It's, you know, a new tidal gate that's going to cost $1.5 million to put in place, or a new, you know, seawall barrier at the Border Street Bridge that costs $40 million. I mean, you know, they may be pie in the sky, but at least having them on a list gives them legitimacy. That, you know, you may put a probability against them of 0 to 100%. But that's what I'm thinking. Because I think we've complained that, you know, the town in town meeting can't make decisions because they're accusing the select board of not giving them a preview of what are the hundreds of millions of dollars to come in expenses that we're going to have to put up for a bond. And the select board says, we'd like to do it, but we don't, you know, they haven't done it. And I would like to be in a position where at least Harbor Committee can maybe set an example and help lead in supplying information to whichever capital committee is going to be out there to try and create that list. Those are a couple of subcommittees. I don't want to go crazy on it. I just want to try and find a way to get stuff done in between the scheduled meetings we have. But in terms of this object number 2, I'd like to work with you, Mike, specifically, not to exclude Lori, but to try and put these layers together with the objective. And it goes to Noel's plan. We need more information. This whole business of what is demand for stuff, you know, what's demand for climate change resilience that's going to cost money. We're going to find out. But to put together a plan that we can literally not spend a ton of time, but with select board say, this is what we're working on. Here's the things we're thinking about. We're trying to get in front of the next unknown development or the next catastrophe. And because they don't know that. And I see an opportunity to do that. If you're willing, Mike.
Yeah.
What other thoughts do you have to bring to today's meeting? Lori?
None.
None.
We're good. Thank you for attending. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
So moved.
Seeing no opposition, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Montana.
Of course.